January 1071. Isle of Ely, England. 240 Viking warships, the largest Danish fleet to hit England in a generation, lie abandoned in the Humber estuary. Their crews have sailed home, not in defeat, not routed in battle. They simply left. This is the fleet that demolished York's castles just 2 years earlier. Warriors who butchered Norman garrisons and sent William the Conqueror scrambling north in winter. Men who came believing they would reconquer England, split the kingdom with English rebels, and restore the old order. Instead, they took their loot and ran. Here's what makes no sense. The Vikings won their battles. They sacked Peterborough Abbey, one of the richest targets in England. They controlled the fenlands, where William's knights were useless in the marshes. King Svein II himself came to seal the conquest. The English believed liberation was at hand, and then the Danes just negotiated peace and left their English allies to die. This is the siege where the Viking Age in England truly ended. Not at Stamford Bridge in 1066, not at Hastings, but here in the waterlogged fens of Ely, where the last organized resistance drowned in the realization that England had become impossible to conquer. William didn't win by defeating the Vikings in battle. He made England into something Vikings couldn't fight, a landscape of stone fortresses, rapid response cavalry, and a system so alien to traditional warfare that even victory felt like defeat. This is how one man's military revolution turned the most feared warriors in Europe into raiders who knew when to quit. This is the Siege of Ely. 1068. 2 years after Hastings, William has a crown. What he doesn't have is a country. Winning a single battle, even a decisive one, doesn't conquer a kingdom. It just removes one king. And England in 1068 is learning that lesson the hard way. The North refuses to kneel. York becomes the beating heart of resistance. English nobles who bent the knee are now straightening their spines. And they're sending letters across the North Sea to Denmark. The message is simple. Come finish what Harold Hardrada started. Think about what this means. The English are so desperate, so convinced that Norman rule is temporary, that they're inviting the same Vikings who've raided their coasts for centuries. The enemy of my enemy logic played at kingdom stakes. King Svein II of Denmark listens, and he likes what he hears. Why? Because Svein has a claim to England. His uncle was Knut the Great, the Danish king who ruled England, Denmark, and Norway simultaneously. In Svein's mind, England isn't Norman territory. It's Danish inheritance, temporarily misplaced. William responds the only way he knows how. He doesn't negotiate, he doesn't send diplomats, he builds castles, 2 of them, in York alone. Stone and timber rising from English soil, foreign fortresses garrisoned by foreign soldiers. The message couldn't be clearer. William isn't visiting, he's staying. But castles take time to matter. And in 1069, time runs out. Summer 1069, the Humber estuary, 240 dragon-prowed ships darken the horizon. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, written by monks who had no love for Vikings, records this fleet with something close to awe. This isn't a raid. This is an invasion force. Professional warriors, battle-hardened veterans, men who've grown up on stories of Knut's empire and believe they're about to rebuild it. They link up with English rebels almost immediately. Edgar Etheling, the last male heir of the old Anglo-Saxon royal line, joins them. So does Waltheof, one of the most powerful English earls. The northern nobility throws in their lot. This is the nightmare scenario for William. A legitimate English claimant backed by Danish steel. Native support combined with foreign muscle. Everything that made Hastings possible is now working against him. September 1069, York. The combined force hits William's castles like a battering ram. What happens next is catastrophic for the Normans. The castles, those symbols of permanent conquest, are demolished. The garrisons are slaughtered to a man. 3,000 Normans die in a single day. The city burns, but the rebels don't care. This is liberation. For one shining moment, Hastings looks like a setback, not a conclusion. The North is free. Danish and English warriors feast in the ruins of Norman ambition. Messengers race south with impossible news. York has fallen. William's grip is breaking. And William? William is already moving. Winter 1069. The march north. What William does next will echo through English history for centuries. And not in a good way, he marches his army north, in winter, through Christmas. While other kings would be feasting in warm halls, William is pushing through frozen roads with murder in his heart. But he doesn't march toward York, not directly. He marches through the north. Every village, every farm, every grain store. The harrying of the north begins. This isn't warfare. This is annihilation. William's men burn crops in the fields, slaughter livestock, destroy tools and seed grain. They're not trying to defeat an army. They're trying to kill a region. Chroniclers will later estimate 100,000 dead. Modern historians debate the numbers, but not the intent. William is salting the earth, making the North incapable of supporting rebellion, making it incapable of supporting life. The Danish fleet watches from the Humber, safe on their ships, untouchable by land. And here's the first hint of what's coming. The Vikings don't advance. They don't push inland to challenge William. They raid the coastline, grab what they can, and retreat to their floating fortress. They're winning, but they're not conquering. There's a difference, and the Danes are starting to understand it. Spring 1070. The Fenlands. King Swine II arrives personally. This changes everything. A raiding fleet is one thing. A king leading his army is a statement of intent. Swine isn't here for plunder. He's here for a throne. The Danes push deep into the Fenlands, that waterlogged maze of marshes and islands in eastern England. They establish themselves on the Isle of Ely. Look at a map of medieval Ely, and you'll understand why. The Isle isn't really an island. It's a slight elevation in an ocean of marshland. Reeds taller than men. Water that looks solid until you step on it. Channels that shift with the seasons. Causeways so narrow that two men can barely walk abreast. For Norman cavalry, this terrain is a death sentence. Knights need solid ground to charge. War horses need space to build momentum. The entire Norman military system, the one that crushed Harold at Hastings, becomes worthless in the fens. But for Vikings? Men who've spent their lives on ships, who fight on foot, who understand water better than land? Paradise. The locals believe, genuinely believe, that the Danes will conquer all England. The Chronicle records their hope without irony. This is the moment. This is liberation. Sweyn establishes his camp. English rebels flood to join him, and a new figure emerges from the Fenland mists. His name is Hereward. Hereward the Wake. History remembers him as a legend. Folklore transformed him into Robin Hood before Robin Hood existed. But in 1070, he's something simpler and more dangerous. A local man with nothing left to lose. The Normans took his lands, killed his brother, burned his family's holdings. Hereward returned from exile to find everything gone. So he went to war. He knows the fens like he knows his own heartbeat. Every hidden channel, every patch of solid ground, every route that looks passable but swallows men whole. In this landscape, Hereward isn't just a rebel. He's a ghost, striking from nowhere, vanishing into reeds. And now he has an army at his back. The Danish forces recognize his value immediately. Local knowledge combined with Viking steel. English legitimacy fused with Scandinavian muscle. The alliance that should have been impossible is suddenly unstoppable. They need supplies. They need wealth. They need to prove that Norman England bleeds. They need Peterborough. June 1070, Peterborough Abbey. Imagine the richest target in eastern England. Centuries of accumulated wealth, gold chalices, silver crosses, jeweled reliquaries holding saints' bones, illuminated manuscripts worth more than villages, the church's treasure concentrated in one place. Now imagine it defended by monks. Hereward and the Danes move fast. The abbey never stands a chance. What follows is methodical plunder on a scale the Fenlands have never seen. The raiders strip Peterborough to its bones. Gold flows back to Ely. Relics that took generations to accumulate disappear in hours. The monks can only watch and weep. The chronicle, written by monks who would later reoccupy Peterborough, describes the sack with barely contained fury. But beneath the outrage, there's something else. Fear. Because this raid proves something terrifying for Norman England. The rebels aren't hiding. They're not desperate fugitives scraping for survival. They're launching offensive operations, taking what they want, flaunting their power. Ely transforms overnight. The rebel camp becomes a rebel capital. Treasure fills the coffers. Warriors arrive daily, English thanes who've lost everything, Danish veterans hungry for conquest, outlaws seeking purpose. The impossible is happening. William's England is fracturing. Summer 1070. The moment of decision. Sweyn II stands at a crossroads. He has momentum. He has wealth. He has the perfect defensive position. English rebels worship him as a liberator. One more push. Inland toward the heart of Norman power, and everything changes. But Sweyn is looking at something the rebels can't see. He's looking at castles, not York's ruined fortresses. Those are rebuilt already, stronger than before. No, Sweyn is counting the new castles, the ones sprouting across England, like stone weeds. Lincoln, Nottingham, Huntingdon, Cambridge, a network of fortified points that didn't exist 3 years ago. Each castle is a problem. Not because Vikings can't take castles, they can, given time, but because each siege costs weeks, months. And while you're besieging one castle, Norman cavalry is riding from 3 others. William has created something new, a system where individual victories don't matter. Take York? He builds it again. Burn a garrison? He sends another. Win every battle? He still has more castles, more knights, more staying power. The Vikings operated on raid logic for 3 centuries. Hit fast, grab wealth, leave before the response arrives, or stay and settle, absorbing into the local population. But William's England doesn't allow either option. Leave, and the castles remain. Stay, and the cavalry hunts you forever. Sweyn does the math, and the math is brutal. The betrayal. Sweyn opens negotiations with William. The English rebels don't know, yet. They're still celebrating Peterborough, still believing that liberation is one campaign away, still trusting that Danish honor means Danish commitment. The terms are simple. Sweyn takes his fleet and leaves. In exchange, he keeps everything he's plundered. William doesn't pursue. Both kings pretend this was always the plan. It's not betrayal in the dramatic sense. No midnight defection, no dagger in the back. It's worse, it's calculation. Sweyn looks at England and sees a trap. A beautiful, wealthy, tempting trap. But a trap nonetheless. Every instinct that made Vikings successful for 250 years is now a liability. Speed means nothing against permanent garrisons. Mobility means nothing when every road leads past a castle. Even victory means nothing when the enemy can simply rebuild. The Danish fleet weighs anchor. Sails fill with North Sea wind. And just like that, the largest Viking force to threaten England in a generation is gone. Autumn 1070. Ely abandoned. Imagine the moment the English rebels realize what's happened. One day, Danish ships crowd the waterways. Warriors sharpen axes. Plans unfold for the spring campaign. The next day, silence. Empty anchorages. footprints in mud leading nowhere. Hereward watches the horizon. The sails don't return. The rebels are alone. Not just alone, exposed. They've sacked Peterborough, killed Normans, burned William's property. There's no negotiating their way out. No submission that William will accept. They have two choices: die fighting or die running. Ely becomes something new, not a base for reconquest, a last stand. The rebels who remain are the ones with nowhere else to go. Hereward, whose lands are ash. Morcar, the Earl of Northumbria, who threw in with the Danes and can't throw back out. Monks who joined the rebellion and face execution if captured. Outlaws, exiles, the desperate and the doomed. They look at their fenland fortress and make a decision. If England's old order dies here, it dies, fighting. Winter, 1070-1071. William's patience. William doesn't attack immediately. This surprises everyone. The Conqueror's reputation is built on swift, brutal action. He marched through Christmas to harry the north. He's not known for hesitation, but Ely is different. William's scouts return with troubling reports. The causeways are death traps. Men who don't know the paths simply disappear. The water looks shallow until you're chest deep in freezing mud. Horses panic and drown. Armor becomes an anchor. For the first time since Hastings, William faces terrain that neutralizes everything he does well. His knights are useless. His cavalry charges are impossible. His castle building means nothing in a swamp. The rebels have found the one place in England where Norman military supremacy evaporates. William settles in for a siege. But sieges work both ways. Ely is defensible, yes. It's also isolated. No reinforcements coming. No Danish fleet returning. Supplies that seemed abundant start looking finite. The rebels control a fortress. William controls everything else. Time becomes a weapon, and William has more of it. Spring 1071. The siege begins. William moves his army into position around the fenlands. Not to assault, he's learned that lesson. To contain. Every exit watched. Every causeway guarded. Every boat that might carry supplies intercepted. Then he starts building. Not castles this time. Something stranger. A causeway, across the marsh, toward Ely. The engineering is ambitious, bordering on insane. Medieval sources describe timber and stone laid across miles of swamp. Bundles of sticks thrown into bottomless mud. A road being born where no road should exist. The rebels watch from Ely, and for the first time, they feel something new. Not fear of battle. They'd welcome battle. Fear of patience. Fear of a man who will spend months building a road rather than accept that some places can't be reached. William isn't trying to defeat them anymore. He's trying to erase the advantage that keeps them alive. Summer 1071. The causeway. Week after week, the road grows. William's engineers work with manic focus. Timber disappears into the marsh. Stone follows. Soldiers haul materials through waist-deep water, and when soldiers collapse, more soldiers replace them. The cost in labor is staggering. The cost in lives, uncounted. But the causeway advances. The rebels launch raids. Hereward's men slip out at night, kill work crews, burn supplies, vanish before dawn. Every morning, Norman bodies float in the reeds. Every morning, the work continues anyway. This is the horror of fighting William. Not his cruelty, though he's cruel enough. His persistence. Other kings would rage, would demand a glorious assault, would throw men at the problem until it broke, or they did. William just builds. The rebels calculate distances, measure the causeway's progress against their remaining supplies. The math gets worse every day. And then William tries something else. The witch. Medieval chroniclers record this with straight faces, so we'll report it the same way. William brings a witch to the siege. She's supposed to curse the defenders, stand at the edge of the causeway and hurl supernatural doom at Ely, break rebel morale through sheer terror. What happens next depends on which source you trust. Some say the causeway collapsed under the weight of soldiers following the witch's ritual. Others say Hereward's men set fires that spread along the timber road, consuming witch, soldiers, and engineering in a single conflagration. One account claims the rebels captured her. The result is the same. The first causeway fails. Norman soldiers die screaming in burning wreckage or drowning in marsh water. William's grand engineering project becomes a funeral pyre. Ely holds for one more month, maybe two, but William doesn't stop. The second causeway, he starts again. Different approach this time, wider, more support structures, heavier materials. William has learned from the failure, and William always learns. The rebels watch the new road grow with something beyond fear. Exhaustion. They've been fighting since 1069. 2 years of resistance. 2 years of hoping for Danish salvation that sailed away. 2 years of watching friends die and walls shrink. Hereward still fights, still leads midnight raids, still kills Normans in the dark. But he's one man, and his army is bleeding out slowly. Food runs low. Fresh water becomes precious. The wounded can't heal because there's nothing to heal them with. Ely transforms from fortress to prison, and the causeway keeps coming. The betrayal within. Someone talks. The sources disagree on who. Some blame the monks of Ely, who feared their abbey's destruction. Others point to English nobles who saw the end coming and wanted to survive it. A few accounts suggest simple bribery, gold for information, safety for treachery. The identity matters less than the information. Someone tells Williams, men the secret paths, the hidden routes through the marsh that only locals know. The approaches that Hereward has guarded since the siege began. Norman scouts slip through at night, testing the intelligence, finding it accurate. William now has 2 options. The causeway, slow, costly, certain, or the secret paths, fast, risky, decisive. He chooses both. The fall of Ely. It happens faster than anyone expects. Norman forces advance along the causeway, drawing rebel attention. Defenders mass at the obvious threat. Hereward coordinates the defense he's run a dozen times before. But this time, other Normans are moving through the marsh. They come from angles that shouldn't exist. Paths the rebels thought were impassable. Suddenly, Ely isn't a fortress anymore. It's a trap with enemies inside. The fighting is brutal and brief. Rebels who've held out for months collapse in hours. The defensive positions that worked against frontal assault become death traps when enemies appear from behind. Morcar surrenders. The Earl who gambled everything on Danish liberation will spend the rest of his life in Norman prisons. The monks surrender. They'll keep their lives in exchange for their abbey, and their silence about what happened here. The common rebels die or scatter. No terms offered, no quarter given. And Hereward? The ghost escapes. Hereward vanishes. One moment he's fighting. The next, the marshes swallow him whole. Norman soldiers search the fens for weeks and find nothing. The man who knew every hidden path uses that knowledge one final time. Legend will later claim he made peace with William, that he regained his lands, that he lived out his days as a respectable English landowner under Norman rule. The truth is simpler and sadder. Hereward disappears from history after Ely. Maybe he escaped to Scotland. Maybe he died in some unmarked fenland grave. Maybe the stories are true and he bent the knee. It doesn't matter. His cause died at Ely. Everything he fought for drowned in that marsh. And England became something new, what the Vikings understood. Here's what makes Ely different from every other Norman victory. Hastings proved William could win battles. The harrying proved he could be brutal. But Ely proved something more terrifying. It proved his system worked. The Danes didn't leave because they were cowards. They left because they were smart. They looked at William's England and saw a machine designed to make Viking warfare obsolete. Think about how Vikings conquered before. Hit the coast, overwhelm local defense, grab territory before the king can respond, settle in or sail away, depending on resistance. Every step of that playbook now fails against William. Hit the coast, castles spot you coming and send riders to the king, overwhelm local defense. The local garrison retreats behind stone walls and waits for relief. Grab territory? Cavalry arrives within days, not weeks. Settle in? Congratulations. You're now surrounded by fortresses full of men who want you dead. Sweyn II saw this. His captains saw this. That's why 240 ships went home without losing a battle. They won every fight and realized winning didn't matter. The revolution complete. After Ely, there are no more serious rebellions, not because Englishmen love their Norman masters, not because resistance is unthinkable, but because resistance is now suicidal. The castle network covers England like a net. Every major town garrisoned, every strategic point fortified, every road watched. The feudal system provides permanent military power. Knights owe service for land. Land requires defense. The army regenerates automatically. And cavalry, fast, mobile, devastating, can reach any point in the kingdom within days. This is the England that emerges from Ely's fall. Not a conquered territory waiting for liberation. A military state that makes liberation impossible. The Vikings raided England for 250 years. From Lindisfarne in 793 to York in 1069. They came and took what they wanted. Some settled, some ruled. England was their ATM, their retirement plan, their endless opportunity. After 1071, they never seriously try again. The last lesson. The siege of Ely matters more than Hastings. Not for drama. Hastings has the drama. But for meaning. Hastings answered a simple question. Who wears the crown? Ely answered the question that actually mattered. What kind of warfare wins kingdoms? The Vikings learned the answer in the worst way possible. Watching their allies abandoned. Watching their strategy fail. Watching a new kind of war machine grind resistance into mud. They sailed home with their loot and their lives. That was the smart play. But they also sailed home knowing something had ended. England, the richest target in Northern Europe, the prize that launched 1,000 longships, was closed forever. Not because William was braver, not because Normans were better warriors, because William built a system that turned victory into defeat. That made every raid more costly than the last. That punished the very tactics that made Vikings terrifying. The siege of Ely wasn't about one fortress in a swamp. It was about the death of an age. The Vikings who sailed away from England in 1070 weren't retreating from battle. They were retreating from the future. And in that fenland marsh, ankle-deep in water and surrounded by enemies, the last defenders of the old order finally understood. The world had changed, and there was no changing it back.